So, it's time to talk about what I learned because last year I challenged myself to talk positively about and with anyone I talked to, and I learned a lot. So, I'm excited to share what those talking points are. I have 5, and I hope that this will encourage you in your journey of learning how to navigate your relationships more positively, and maybe you will also try this challenge in next month or week or even for a day. It was pretty cool. So strap on in, good viber, get ready, because your girl Esther Joy is coming at you with another video. I feel like I should have an intro, and it should be like, but that is the intro. So now let's dive into it because last month was July, and I had this realization of what I wanted to challenge myself. Before that month, I was actually thinking about it in bed, and a moth came up when I was like, I should think about people more positively and the conversations I have with them. And a moth literally popped out of nowhere in my room and was like flying in front of my face as soon as I had that thought. So I got up immediately and I wrote it down to make sure that I remember it and am accountable. So well over a month has passed since then, and it was quite a challenge. Gosh, I'm excited to share some of the stories and the situations that came up throughout this challenge that made it a little extra spicy and difficult. But overall, I'm really excited to share what I learned and what I'm continuing to do after the challenge because it taught me. So, alrighty, let's just dive into it because I learned a good amount, and I also shared on Twitter. I felt like it was a good way to kind of share what I was learning, although maybe I could have done a better job at sharing and updating. But, anyways, the first thing I learned was you are the one who determines what is negative or positive. You're the one that determines what's good or bad in a conversation. And so it is good. I found myself judging every single word people were saying, trying to figure out, is this good or is this bad? And I realized I was the one that was determining it. And then what happens if it's bad? Do I totally shut down and walk away from that conversation? So just being clear, because I realized a lot of people wanted to share the harder parts in life, and they weren't necessarily positive. There is this trap of toxic positivity, which is an avoidance to negativity. And it's almost like you're nullifying negativity's existence for fear that it will muddle your positivity. And I didn't want that kind of energy for this challenge. I wanted to genuinely just have good conversations that I believe left us both feeling more positive at the end. And I realized that sometimes it meant seeing where that person is at and acknowledging where they're at. And I'm going to talk about that more in the next point. But yeah, people take their time to tear down others, but as soon as you lift them up, they're fast. What does that mean? Well, I think there's an old friend group that I would hang out with, and I found it was a lot easier to talk badly about people than to raise them up. Like, you could talk to someone for almost a half hour about how ridiculous of a bad job they did on this, but when it came to actually praising them or saying positive things, it was usually like, oh, they did a good job. And that was the end of the conversation. And I found that really interesting when we talk about leaky time and energy vampires and that kind of energy that sucks your soul, literally. That is a sign. It was, why would anybody want to spend time tearing another one down? That's just wasting both of our time. So I found it pretty effective to just note a positive quality or trait about any one or thing that people felt led to tear down. And yeah, I think it kind of worked out pretty well for the most part. So yeah, the first thing is you determine what is good or bad. Okay. The second thing I learned is you will choose to hear what you want. It's a reflection of you. So I realized a lot of the negativity I hear other people share is due to my own selective hearing. And it really does start with acknowledging what's resonating for me and how it applies to my life. Once I started accepting that the conversations were reflections of my own perspective, it changed the script. So this learning point was kind of challenging because it made me accept the parts of myself that were looking for negativity. And I realized how much I was actually on guard to that kind of negative dialogue. And it was starting with me. It didn't mean that person was actually intending to, waste my time or say something negative. They were simply expressing where they're at and what's on their mind. And I was picking up the parts that I think, especially because of this challenge, I was hypersensitive to the negative parts. It really made it very clear what I was resonating with. And I kind of get frustrated with myself a couple of times during the challenge because I would feel like either I was focusing too much on the negativity, and there wasn't much clarity with where I wanted the conversation to go. So yeah, that was definitely something I learned. A lot of the negativity was actually just a strong reflection of where I was at and what I was resonating with and my perspective of that person. So it was a pretty good lesson, and one that I'm thankful I can continue to learn from with every single interaction I have with someone, understanding that I'm seeing things through my own lens and perspective.
And drink a little water. If you have your hydration, this is actually pineapple juice and lemonade.
Beautiful. Okay. So, yeah, that's the second thing I learned, I believe. And I learned a couple things, but the next one was there's a difference between agreeing with a negative comment or observing it. So it's important to acknowledge where someone is coming from. I think this was really hard for me because I wanted all the conversations to be positive. I realized that that's a bit of toxic positivity, and I can't avoid the negativity entirely because there has to be a balance. And so this challenge forced me to look at the conversations I was having with people, or even inside my own mind, and to find that line of balance between what people are saying. It's really important to, when someone's talking, to listen. And I realize most of the times we're not looking for someone to give us a solution or to invalidate what we're saying or to skim over it so that we can get to the good part where it is happier and more positive. If someone is sharing that they're having a hard time because their brother or family member or loved one is dying, then it doesn't make any sense to be like, well, skip to the positive part when that person is clearly not in a receiving mode for that level of positivity. So it is good and it's beneficial to observe and to acknowledge where the other person is at. That does not mean that you're agreeing with them, and you have to be very clear with how you are using your words so that you can show the other person that you are listening, you see where they're at, and you respect this part of the chapter that they're in. You're not there to force them to be happy or positive. You are honestly just honored that they trusted you with this information so that you could create a space where they can process what they're going through without judgment. So this was a big thing I think I learned with, and it gave me a lot of peace as well. Okay. Okay, so I know the camera kind of has been skipping or pausing for a second. Please forgive me. We're working with OBS. I've been doing some stuff to my computer lately, so I have 2 bonus things that I learned, and hopefully these will be good takeaways for you, beautiful soul, on your journey. The first one starts with a story because during this monthly challenge, it was my mom's birthday, and we have a birthday tradition where we go around the table as we eat the birthday cake and we share a few words of encouragement or reflection on that person, whoever's birthday it is. My mom specifically asked for critiques this year. She wanted to hear some things that maybe we didn't so much like about her, or we thought that she could improve upon, that maybe frustrated us. And I found this really interesting, knowing that I was going through this challenge of talking with and about people positively. How was I going to give my own mother critiques about things that I found frustrating in a positive way? And so I think it became clear to me that you can still, and also with boundaries as well, I found some times where maybe people were getting on my nerve or they were crossing my boundaries, where I had to be very clear and stern. And I realized that you can be very stern and direct with setting your boundaries, and in a respectful way that is still positive without necessarily negatively impacting that person. Like, you can say no and it can still be a positive experience. And that was something I learned. So when it came to giving my mom feedback on her birthday, I found it to be quite a challenge, but one where I was able to remove some of the emotions that I had built up and really share what I felt in a way that was kind of like the criticism sandwich of, okay, here's a good thing, but here's a part that I think you could definitely improve on that's not so good. And the reason why is because I know the potential that you have, and I would love to see that be fully realized within your lifetime. And I think that was a great way to go about it, and to still honor the challenge while honoring my mother's wishes. And there were a lot of different situations that came up which required me to set good boundaries while still having a graceful, neutral, positive underlying demeanor. So I think this whole challenge really taught me how to be clear with where I want the conversations I have with people to go. Of course, that doesn't mean every time I talk to someone I have I think I should, direct every or manipulate every conversation. Absolutely not. I think that's a beautiful part of the spontaneity of talking with someone. But I do realize that it really does help. Like in the beginning, as I shared, how sometimes we can spend a lot more time tearing down others than building them up. I found it really important to be clear with how I'm spending my time and interacting with others to make sure that I'm honoring the energy that I'm giving the conversations. So being clear with where I want the conversation to go. If it's a meeting, then having a clear end agenda, action points at the end of the meeting. If I'm talking with a coworker, being very clear on what job we're doing and what the expectations are. I think this has been really helpful with using my time wisely, as best as I can. And yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes people just want to go on a rant and they just want to literally let off that negative energy, and they are just looking for someone to lend them an ear. And I've been on the receiving end of that. And quite honestly, when that happens, this challenge, I'd be a little frustrated because I'm like, oh my gosh. But I would allow myself to surrender, because I know at the end of the day, the most important thing is to allow that energy to be neutral so that it can have the least lasting impact on my energy field, and I can go on my day unaffected. So just surrendering to what it is. Sometimes if I'm in a conversation I'd rather not be in because of the negative nature, and I can't find a graceful way to exit, then surrendering to the situation and seeing how quickly that neutralizes the conversation. Yeah. Okay, I have one more last note for you before we go. Okay, I'm gonna take a little sip of the top. Oh, yes. So, I think the biggest thing I learned ultimately from this challenge, and I absolutely encourage you to try this out for yourself and see how you like it, because it helped me a lot with the conversations and cultivating the relationships in my life. A part of the human connection is connecting through our shared sense of suffering and supporting one another through that. I think I learned that through this challenge, through what people would feel led to share with me, and what I would share with them. And I think it was kind of refreshing at the end. To be honest, I did put a lot of pressure on myself to have positive conversations to win about with people. But at the end of the day, I think it did leave a lasting impact on how I choose to talk with people and use my time. I think it really did help on that aspect, but it also helped me understand why some conversations are lower than others, whether it be because of the reflection within my own soul that I see from those conversations, or simply the way that we connect sometimes, where that pain, it needs to be acknowledged. And that's one of the first steps to healing, is acknowledging the pain. And so having conversations that sometimes aren't so positive can still be really healing and ultimately positive experience, because they open the door for that healing to happen. And as a listener, it's not your job to offer solutions or to heal that pain. You're just there to simply witness it at times, and to validate the fact that that person did go through something that was hard and not so positive, and that's okay, coming from a more neutral place. I think neutrality definitely was the key to keeping things in balance, because there were just some times where it wasn't as positive, and that's totally okay, and it was absolutely necessary for the balance of life, and for that true connection. I wouldn't want to have it any other way. I think it's important to have a balance, and this challenge really taught me that, and it definitely did challenge me, and I realized I talked to people a lot less when it came to the wouldn't really choose me to rant about things that they were tired of or people they didn't like. And I do really appreciate that, and am happy about the end results of this challenge. So I'm curious if you've ever tried a challenge like this. If you do, challenge yourself to talk with and about people positively. I'd love to know how it goes for you. Feel free to share in the comments below, and thank you so much for joining me in this video. I love you, I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. God bless. Namaste.